Businessman and author of Truths, The Future of America First. Vivek, as always, welcome back. Just want to get your take on this big media event with Elon Musk and also Trump's return to X, which some people have been advocating. All right, he's on. He's got 89 million some odd followers. A whole lot of people listened to the interview last night. I know there were technical issues, but they seem to have gotten straightened out. Vivek, all this internet, social media, substantive stuff is right up your alley. What do you think about it?
I think it's great. I think it's a great chance for Americans to see Donald Trump in long form. That's what we should want of our presidential candidates. And Larry, I think it is pathetic that Kamala Harris has not sat down for one serious interview, long form or short form, with the media of any kind. I think it was smart of Elon, and he was correct in extending that same invitation to Kamala Harris. I doubt she'll take him up on it. But if she does, I'll give her credit for that, too, because that makes the country stronger. One of the things that was most remarkable to me about it, Larry, though, was how threatened certain people were by the existence of that interview. Kamala Harris's team was criticizing things Donald Trump said, even as she refuses to sit for those same interviews. And then look at the EU's censorship demands ahead of that interview to Elon Musk. That is, I think, arresting. When you think about the United States of America having foreign countries worried about an open conversation with a U.S. president in the United States of America, that should be setting alarm bells, and I think that dimension was not discussed enough, if you ask me.
Actually, we'll put it into the RIF. It's a great point. We'll put it into the RIF of the EU, which has some nerve. Was there hacking at the beginning of this thing? Where I don't know what the story was, and even if I knew, I probably wouldn't understand it, Vivek. What do you think?
Look, hacking or some type of attack or cyber attack that stopped people from joining. That's what Elon signaled via his tweet. I don't think the technical details matter for what happened at the start of that. That would be like the equivalent of if our interview glitched and we spent 10 minutes talking about it. It's a boring subject. What I care much more about is the content of what was discussed. And if we focus this election on sealing the border, growing the economy, staying out of World War III, and reviving national pride, that's what I heard in that conversation yesterday. I think we win this thing handily. The more we focus on policy and our vision for the future, the more successful we're going to be. The less we focus on that, the less successful we're going to be. That's the bottom line on this election. And just on that point about even foreign interference, when I think about this yesterday, Larry, that sent chills down my spine ahead of this interview or this discussion that Elon Musk had with Donald Trump. If that was Russia telling a mainstream media news outlet that ahead of them talking to Kamala Harris, they had to abide by the EU's perspectives on that discussion. Imagine what the reaction in this country would be. You know what? Our reaction shouldn't be any different when the same shoe fits the other foot. And so I do think that was one of the more alarming things that happened yesterday that escaped notice.
I roughed out some of the topics. You know, it's a very long interview. I think it was over an hour and so forth. Actually, it might have been closer to 2 hours. But from your own, I don't know what you heard of it from the RIF tonight. Does it sound like Mr. Trump is now moved back on message? That's the key. You know, I had Kellyanne Conway on the show last night. We were going back and forth. We are very dear friends, she and I, and we both agreed, let's have insights, not insults. And it just seems like the speech in Montana by Mr. Trump over the weekend and this interview with Mr. Elon Musk sounds like he's really kind of back on important messaging. Do you think that's correct?
Well, look, I talk to President Trump pretty frequently, and one of the things I love about him is he is always himself. He's authentic. Voters are hungry for that. They don't want a candidate who is managed by the advisor class around them. That's what you get with Joe Biden. That's what you get with Kamala Harris. They're really just puppets for a system that sits underneath them. Donald Trump is different in that way, and I think that the best Donald Trump is the true Donald Trump, somebody who's actually showing voters who he is. At the same time, I do think he believes that a focus on policy is the way to win this election because Kamala Harris has served up a policy record that's really, frankly, so easy to go after. You don't need to go after her personally because the stronger insults are actually the insults of her policy record. You think about somebody, despite what she says now, has favored a single-payer health care system, nationalization of U.S. health care, something the GOP has not talked about enough, Larry. You want to talk about somebody who favors the Green New Deal so much so that she co-sponsored the legislation and said that she would end the filibuster to ram it through. Somebody who actually favors a tax on unrealized capital gains. That means many small business owners across this country will literally have to owe taxes that they don't have the cash to pay. That's a formula for a market crash and a second Great Depression. She leaves a lot for the picking to say that if that's what you want, go with Kamala Harris. If not, come our way and vote for Donald Trump. And I think that's what's going to win us this election.
You know, let's go back for a second. The wealth tax on unrealized capital gains, which is so crazy. And, you know, it would kill, retirees would get killed. Farmers would get killed. Ranchers would get killed. As you said, small business people would get killed. I think that one probably deserves a special place in hell. I mean, I think it deserves more discussion, just how bad that would be. Look, only markets, you know this. An asset is worth only what somebody's going to pay for it. And you're going to set up some IRS bureaucracy that's going to make valuations on sales that were never even completed. You're literally taking money out of people's hands and out of their wallets, literally pulling it out one by one. That's crazy. I mean, it's totally un-American.
It would also trigger a stock market crash because you have a lot of Americans sitting on long-term, sometimes decades-long capital gains that they would then have to sell, which creates a technical effect. That's a formula for a stock market crash. That hurts everyday Americans, retirees in their 401k accounts. Then you think about landowners and farmers. They're illiquid. They don't have the cash to pay what the government says their land or their business is worth. So this is one of the issues. I think there's two things, Larry, that Republicans need to focus on that we haven't yet. It is Kamala Harris's support for nationalizing the U.S. healthcare system, which would decimate all healthcare innovation in this country, and her focus on an unrealized capital gains tax. That is a formula for economic calamity. If you want that, you got your candidate. Kamala Harris is sitting right there for you. But if you want to go the direction of economic growth and prosperity and lifting up all Americans, the choice could not be clearer. Donald Trump's the way to go.
You know, one more related to the nationalizing of health care and so forth. Ending private insurance, which she has said several times. You know,
yes.
There's, last I looked, 150, 160 million, maybe more. Most Americans get their health care from their employers, okay? Or they have a kind of co-payment employer-employee, as they do with the stock market. But that's private insurance. That would all be about 150 million. I don't know, maybe more, maybe closer to 200 million people would lose their health insurance if you abolish private insurance. She's for that. I haven't heard her change her mind. And anyway, if she flip-flops, nobody's going to believe it.
Yeah, look, she was on a Democratic debate stage where they asked a flat-out question. This was not some sort of wishy-washy extrapolation. They said, raise your hand if you would abolish private health insurance. She raised her hand. She has been crystal clear on this issue. She was the co-sponsor. She didn't just support nationalizing U.S. health care. She was the co-sponsor of the bill with Bernie Sanders to actually do it. She even said that in certain cases for the Green New Deal, which also included one-time national health care, she said she would end the Senate filibuster to pass it through. So whatever she says in the next 3 months doesn't matter because her actions speak louder than her words. And I do think you have a real choice here for what direction the future of the country is going to take. Single-payer health care reduces health choice for all Americans, requires a massive bureaucracy to administer. And if you like your private health insurance plan right now, anybody who's watching this, if you like your private health insurance plan, you better believe and bet that that is gone if Kamala Harris gets her way. Now, maybe some people want that gone. That's great. Vote for her. If not, you have a different candidate. And I think that that choice on policy is about as stark as we've had probably in the 21st century between two candidates of very different visions. Now it's up to the voters to decide which one they want.
You know, this came up when the original Obamacare came in, the idea of abolishing private insurance, which is, again, most people get their health care insurance from their business. And it was vastly, vastly unpopular, vastly unpopular. Anyway, last one, because a lot of people don't understand that Trump does want to limit government and cut back unnecessary and inefficient spending. We have some tape on what Mr. Musk and Mr. Trump talked about with respect to Government Efficiency Commission. Take a listen, please.
I think it would be great to just have a government efficiency commission that takes a look at these things and just ensures that the taxpayer money, the taxpayers' hard-earned money, is spent in a good way. And I'd be happy to help out on such a commission.
I'd love it
if it were formed.
Well, you're the greatest cutter.
There you go. You're the greatest cutter. This, when I was a young pup working for Reagan, that Peter Grace, the famous businessman, headed up the Grace Commission, and he did a fabulous job. I mean, he could have saved a couple $1 trillion if there had been any follow-through from Congress. But this is important, right? Put Elon on some government spending commission, some government efficiency commission. That's the first we've heard of Mr. Trump talk about that. I think that's progress, Vivek. Give you the last word.
Yeah, look, Elon is a brilliant guy. He and I have talked about this very idea as well. The reality is we don't need 4 million federal bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. That's the second mass deportation we don't talk about. Mass deport those federal bureaucrats out of D.C. to the rest of the country so they can get real jobs in the private sector. And I think, Larry, this is a moment for clarity for Republicans. We do not want, and we should not want, to replace the left-wing nanny state with some right-wing nanny state. We want to dismantle the nanny state. We don't want to replace the left-wing regulatory state with a right-wing regulatory state. We should want to dismantle the regulatory state. And I am glad that's what draining the swamp actually means. If we're being honest, there has been some debate around this. And even in conservative or Republican circles, I come down on one side of that question: shut it down. And if we take that approach, both to government inefficiency and the bureaucracy, we're going to save our country.
Vivek, thank you for your wisdom. Count me in. Sign me up. I'm all for it. We appreciate it very, very much. Vivek Ramaswamy, thanks so much.